Yep. So
Okay, and I'll
now
just
we're
make a
in.
note. We
Yep.
will share that recording with all attendees for afterwards. There you go. Just, and I'll go mute.
Yeah, good shout, Mark. Yep. So this session is recorded, and we will make that recording available to you. So in terms of the workshop schedule, so at the start, I'll just talk about how I've been using NodeXL in my own research, and kind of talk about the other speakers' overview of the workshop, and just a general introduction to some further background reading, recommended text and books that you can kind of use and refer to. And then Dr. Mark Smith will talk about some of the background that underpins NodeXL, some of the key terminologies, and also key methods behind NodeXL. Around 2:30 to 40 UK time, we'll have a quick 10-minute rest break, just to kind of a refresh for the practical session. And we'll then have Harold, who will give us a practical overview of how we can import and analyze and visualize data with NodeXL Pro. So some practical steps on how you can actually analyze the data yourself. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A session at the end as well. So you can drop any questions in the chat, and we can also kind of have a look at those as well. So general tips for Zoom, you can make sure your microphone is muted when not contributing. If you're having any lag issues, one tip is to kind of close other programs that you might have open. And again, feel free to use the chat to ask any questions. So in terms of NodeXL Pro trial licenses, we've been sending out trial licenses to users as they were registering. And Team NodeXL has also been providing one-to-one orientation sessions as well. And if you've not managed to have a one-to-one session, they're also available after the workshop as well. So if you contact us, we can organize for that one-to-one orientation session as well. You can drop us a message in the chat, send us an email or a tweet. So we are issuing a certificate of attendance as well if your faculty or department needs to kind of see that. And we'll hope to do that within 7 days after the event. We also recommend if you have a chance to send out some tweets during the kind of workshop as well. So we're using the hashtag NodeXL, where you can kind of tweet and post and create some social media activity. So Mark Smith introduced us earlier. So delivered quite a few talks with Mark over the years. And Mark is a sociologist who specializes in online communities and computer-mediated interaction. And he's the director of the Social Media Research Foundation and also leads the Connected Action Consulting Group. And Mark will be talking about some of the kind of theory that underpins NodeXL. We're very lucky also to have Harold, who has a research interest in spatial configurations of online networks. And he founded and leads the Digital Space Lab. And he's a real kind of NodeXL expert when it comes to kind of getting data, analyzing and visualizing it. And in terms of myself, my interest in NodeXL arose when I was doing my PhD at the University of Sheffield. And I was analyzing tweets around infectious disease outbreaks, things like swine flu, Ebola, and the Zika virus. And I found NodeXL to be really helpful in my research. And I began to kind of write some articles and papers around NodeXL. So the tool NodeXL is kind of supported by the Social Media Research Foundation, which comprises a number of academics and kind of digital marketing professionals around the world. And the Social Media Research Foundation also has the NodeXL Graph Gallery, which I'm sure kind of Harold and Mark will talk about a bit more. And that allows us to kind of share open data sets around different Twitter topics as well, publish to the web and so forth. And the foundation, as I mentioned, is kind of supported by academics around the world who have got an interest in kind of social media analysis and so forth. So it's kind of widely supported by a number of different academics across the world, as well as kind of digital marketing professionals. And it's become important in recent years to have the tools and methods to analyze social media data because of the recent burst in the various platforms and how they've kind of really arisen in the last few years. So for instance, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. And all of these different platforms have been generating a lot of data for academics to kind of retrieve and analyze. And people have started to kind of write research papers and so forth on them. So in this kind of opening talk, I've got an example from my own research on how we use NodeXL to analyze misinformation around COVID-19, particularly a conspiracy around 5G, and how we can use NodeXL to kind of analyze that data, find influencers, and kind of disrupt the flow of misinformation. And I also include this slide just to highlight that each year, the number of people connecting to social media, connecting to the internet has been increasing. And as more people connect on these platforms, it becomes important to study what people are actually sharing, especially with the kind of recent rise of misinformation being spread. NodeXL kind of allows us to audit that information that's being shared. And each year, kind of more and more people might be connecting to these platforms, kind of generating a lot more data. And this infographic shows the amount of data that's generated in a single minute on the internet. And you might have seen this before. And again, this is updated yearly as well. And when it comes to Twitter, there's almost 200,000 tweets being sent every single internet minute. So that's generating a lot of data on a vast number of topics that we can actually tap into from an academic point of view, but also from a kind of marketing and digital analytics point of view as well. And there's a number of other platforms generating a lot of data as well that we can kind of analyze for insight. So if you've not come across NodeXL, if this is your kind of first interaction with it, essentially NodeXL is a plugin for Microsoft Excel. And we've got a screenshot here of how NodeXL Pro feature appears in Microsoft Excel once you've kind of installed it. And it stands for the Network Overview, Discovery, and Exploration for Excel, NodeXL. And it provides easy access to social media network data streams, advanced network analysis, text and sentiment analysis, and kind of powerful report generation. And you don't really need any programming skills. You can just kind of click and point and kind of get insight into information. And NodeXL has a couple of key features. So we can use it for network analysis and produce network metrics, cluster analysis, vertex metrics. We can use it for content analysis, text analysis, sentiment analysis, time series, and we can produce a really cool looking visualizations as well to accompany all of this insight. And we can customize these network visualizations as well. And one of the benefits I found when using NodeXL in my research was the ability for automation. So we can import the data, import kind of Twitter recipe, which Harold will be showing you, and it kind of automates the analysis for us. Whereas some of the other tools I was using, things like Gephi, required a lot more manual work. So one of the key features, as you learned today, is that NodeXL has the ability for automation. And we published a paper in 2019 reviewing academic literature that had been using NodeXL. And we found that NodeXL has over 7,000 academic citations. And in addition to NodeXL being used for social media research, we also found that because you can import data into NodeXL from other sources, people had also used it for Blackboard discussion boards, analyzing personal email networks, internal security, medical data analysis, news stories, campus-based social media. So over the years, people have managed to bring in data from other sources into NodeXL and kind of analyze that. So if anything has a network-based data where it shows a connection between two items, you can actually bring that in and kind of analyze that for insight. So it's been a really popular tool over the last few years for social media research, but also for some of these other platforms and other data sources. And in terms of recommended reading to kind of complement this session, I would recommend this first book on the top left-hand side, Analyzing Social Media Networks with NodeXL, Insights from a Connected World, second edition. One of the nice things I found with that particular text was that it assumed no prior knowledge, and it kind of takes you from simple steps all the way into some kind of the more advanced steps as well. And it's also useful if you're thinking of including NodeXL in your classes or teaching other students. It can make for a really good kind of core textbook for those purposes. Other books that might be of interest, and I found them useful for general background into the methodology that NodeXL draws upon, social network analysis. I'd recommend these two books, which kind of cover some of the core theoretical aspects of NodeXL. So social network analysis, two kind of further recommended readings that you can read and get some more information on NodeXL. There's also a couple of articles as well that have been well cited. So one of them is Mapping Twitter Topic Networks from Polarized Crowds to Community Clusters. So when we analyze NodeXL datasets, when we could produce those visualizations represent different patterns, and we can infer different things from them, and we can have different shapes of networks. And this article kind of talks us through those different network shapes and structures, how we can interpret them, and how you can interpret them as well when you produce a network graph. So I'd recommend also having a look at some of these reading sources as well. So before kind of handing over to Mark, just wanted to give you a case study of how we were able to use NodeXL for our research in the UK, looking at COVID-19 and the conspiracy theory that was spread on Twitter that was arguing that the 5G telecommunications network, the upgrade from 4G, was actually spreading COVID-19. So it was the main cause. And the first time we saw this, we thought this couldn't be true. But when we looked and investigated, there were people on the internet, people on Twitter who genuinely believed the link between the two. And there were over 20 attacks on 5G telecoms workers in the UK, but also across Europe as well. And Twitter was one of the places people were talking about this conspiracy. So we set out to study this using NodeXL, and we were able to cluster the discussion around this conspiracy network into a number of different groups and pinpoint which users were more influential in spreading the conspiracy. And in one of the groups, group 4, we were able to find out that one particular account was set up with the sole purpose of tagging other people and kind of actively sharing the conspiracy and trying to get that message out. We also inferred other aspects as well. We looked at an isolates group where once the conspiracy began to trend, a lot of people started tweeting about it. And NodeXL also allowed us to find who were the most influential people kind of driving the conspiracy. And it ranged from kind of citizens and a dedicated activism account kind of spreading it as well. And we also found clusters around YouTube as well, people kind of linking to YouTube videos. We also found links to fake news websites as well. So NodeXL also tells us what websites are influential. And we found that InfoWars, a fake news website, was really influential. People selling electromagnetism protection, so clothing to protect against 5G waves, that also became an influential web source as well. So we were able to kind of uncover these insights. We were also able to do a little bit of a kind of content analysis of individual tweets, where we were able to find out who actually believed in the conspiracy, who was just kind of having a bit of humor on that. And NodeXL is also able to find out what tweets were most popular, so most tweets with the retweets, and we can have a look at those as well. So people were kind of inciting other users to go and kind of smash other 5G mast towers and so forth. It also allowed us to examine some of the domains as well. So a specific website was set up just to spread the conspiracy, 5gcrisis.com, and the InfoWars domain as well. So there were many websites kind of linking in there. And based on our research, we were able to make some recommendations for health authorities and just some advice in terms of combating misinformation in the future. So we found there were a lot of accounts set up to spread conspiracies that were shut down eventually, but before being shut down, they sent hundreds of tweets, tagged other users, and kind of became influential. And we kind of had information on there as well around what hashtags were most influential and how the kind of visibility of the network really increased. And we published our findings in the journal JMIR, Journal of Medical Internet Research. And we had a kind of lot of media attention as well, and a lot of kind of interest from other academics. And it was all made possible really by having access to NodeXL that kind of allowed us to be able to quickly and rapidly get that data, analyze it, and kind of publish the paper. So we worked intensely and we did it in around a week, kind of getting the data, analyzing it, working in a team to kind of interpret those findings using NodeXL and then kind of publishing the results. So it's really simple to use and anyone can really use it to kind of get data and analyze it for research purposes. And just before handing over to Mark, just wanted to mention we're having a repeat of the session next month as well. So Mark and the Social Media Research Foundation team will be kind of repeating the session as well. So if you have any other kind of colleagues or students that might be interested, you can kind of forward them the link for that. So I'll pass over to Mark now, and he'll look at social network analysis, some of the background terminology and theory that kind of underpins it. So I think you might be muted, Mark.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Wasim. I think you can now see my screen. Is that correct?
Yep, we can see the screen.
Very good. Thank you for that introduction and for the review of related research. That's very helpful. And here we go. Hi, I'm Mark. I'm a sociologist. I'm part of the Social Media Research Foundation and the NodeXL team. My interest is in understanding how the phenomena of social media takes place. And my training in sociology helps me a little bit by giving me some ideas and tools to work with. And one of these ideas is the concept of collective action. And collective action is anything that takes two or more humans to achieve. It takes two humans at least to make a human. It takes two people to tango. And if you've ever tried to move a couch, it usually takes at least two people to do that. And there are many things that it requires three or more people to achieve, like have a nation or a social movement, or for that matter, a hashtag. And so this phenomena that we're looking at on the screen now, these are birds. They're a kind of bird called a starling. And this phenomena of flocking is, it has its own special word. It's called a mummeration. And so we are looking at a mummeration of starlings. And in some ways, it is a metaphor for what is a hashtag? What is some aggregation of social media? But in other ways, it's only a metaphor. It's not an exact representation. And in particular, there's one thing about starlings that's very different from human beings. And that is all the birds in these images are equal. And humans are never equal. We are hierarchical. There is always a bigger bird. And so if humans were birds, we would not be starlings, we would be chickens, because chickens have a pecking order. There is always a top bird and then the next bird down and the next bird down. They have hierarchy. And so do we. But this image is intended to be evocative, to give you the sense that hashtags form, they rise, they fall, they dissolve, they reform. And what we want to do is actually provide the tools that would allow you to take this picture, to actually photograph a hashtag. And so let's explore that idea. Why do we want to look at social media in the form of a network? And I'm going to try to make this argument by introducing you to one of my favorite numbers. There's the number 10. And 10 is a great number. It's a pretty accurate way of representing information. But this is also 10 things. These are 10 dots. And the shape of their connections to one another is not captured in the number 10. There is more information than merely the fact that there are 10 items. Like some of these things are more connected than others, and the population as a whole has a shape. And so we want to help you think link, to think about how knowing how many people, let's say, are in your hashtag isn't that useful, because here we can see this is a box of Legos. It has 717 pieces. This is also a box of Legos. It has 717 pieces. Are they the same? No, one is Star Wars and one is Minecraft. And so knowing how many bricks are in the box does not tell you what kind of structure is present. And it'll turn out that structure and volume are critical. And so let me now try to motivate our second goal, which is drawing the picture. Why should we draw a picture of a hashtag or of a message board or of a discussion group? Why would it be a good idea to see it rather than, the big data thing? Why don't we just calculate some numbers? Well, let me see if I can make this argument with you. I'm going to ask you to look at these numbers. And I'm going to note that there are 4 XY pairs here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have an X and a Y coordinate for each of these 4 data sets. And I've got questions for you. Can you find the error or the outlier? And can you tell me, of the 4 different data sets, which of them are most like each other? If you're going to pair them up, is 1 closer to 2 or to 3? Or is 1 and 4 the pair? Is it 2 and 4? How would you pair them? And let me know if you have an answer. You can type them in the chat, or if you want to unmute and just sing it out, that's fine. But a lot of people often say, well, wait a second, don't we have statistics? Can't statistics help us here? And of course, this fella, Anscombe, was very clever. This is called Anscombe's quartet. And what he did was he picked a bunch of numbers that all had the same summary statistic values. The average, the variance, the mean, it's all the same. The numbers are different. They're all the same. Okay, so we have now spent collectively, I think we have about 25 of you in here, and we've all spent about 60 seconds. So that's 25 human minutes of brain time. And I'm just going to pause for a second. If anybody has an answer and they want to share it, go ahead. Okay, no answer. So I'm now going to change to the next slide. And I believe in less than 1 second, almost all of you will have an answer to my question. I had a couple of questions. Where are the errors or the outliers, and which of the distributions are most like each other? And you're going to see that if I present the data to you in a just slightly different way, in a visual way, your brain is going to say, oh, why didn't you say so? So here it is. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Can anybody answer the question, where might the error or outlier be? I think you all can. Can we answer the question, which of these things is least like the others? Which are the most together? So what we are interested in is drawing pictures of our data, because when we draw a graphical representation, we get insights. Insights that I don't know about you, but I don't get from this, but I do get from this. And so what would that look like? What would it look like if we drew a picture of a hashtag? How could we capture both the structure and its dynamics? How can we identify the critical events? How do we know what they're talking about? How do we know what is being talked about moves through the network? And new for 2016, invasion and manipulation, we now know that sometimes these spaces are manipulated. And it would be nice to be able to know when that's happening. And so in order to identify abnormal, we will need to have a firm grasp of normal. And so I am a sociologist, and we do have this general principle that 2 or more people is where all the action is, that crowds matter. And so this is from, I think, about 2012. This is Tahrir Square. There's about 350,000 close friends together in Tahrir Square. And when you get 350,000 people together, there's almost nothing you can't do. But these days, especially in COVID, crowds are more likely to form virtually than physically. And because of COVID, they should. You shouldn't be in a crowd, folks, right? Wear a mask. So these days, crowds are more likely to form in social media. They're in discussion groups and Facebook groups and chats, and they're in hashtags and in Twitter, and maybe it's YouTube, and their comments. There are lots and lots of places to post a photo, post a video, post a comment, and interact with other people. The problem is when people interact like that, they become a linear line. They become a list of messages, and they stop being a crowd. And as a sociologist, I have to say the shape of the crowd is really important, and we lose the shape here. And so it's a lot like looking at that table of numbers. It's hard to answer certain kinds of questions when we look at this data. What kinds of questions would we ask? Well, we asked before, where's the outlier? Where's the potential for error? Which things are more like each other? With social media data, we might ask questions like, who is the leader? Are there divisions or factions, groups, subgroups, communities? You might also call them market segments. Who are the leaders of each segment? What is the defining character of each segment? What words do they use? What URLs do they use? What hashtags do they use? And so if we wanted to, we could read the tweets and perhaps we could get a yellow pad and start counting, but that wouldn't, well, it wouldn't scale, right? How many tweets can you read in a minute? I'm going to make an argument that it takes about 10 seconds to read a tweet. And that means that you can read 10 tweets in a minute. And that means how many tweets in an hour? That's 600 tweets an hour. How many tweets in a day? Well, you know, I need lunch and I'm going to need a cup of coffee soon. So maybe I've got 2 to 3, 4 hours a day of tweet reading in me. So a human being can read somewhere on the order of 2,000 to 4,000 tweets a day. How many tweets are being generated on a topic of meaningful relevance to you? Potentially 5,000 or 10,000 tweets a minute. So we have a problem. You are a human being, you are not a machine, and the machines have created a problem. They've created a condition in which humans generate more data than humans can consume. So if the machines have gotten us into that problem, they'll just have to get us out of it. And how would the machines help us? They might be able to read all this stuff and convert it the same way that Anscombe's quartet was converted into a graphical view. How could we turn this discussion of a couple of presidents ago into an image? And in less than a second, could your brain then see the crowd? Let's find out. That's a graph. That's a network. Each of those little dots in this screen, those are people in Twitter, and they talked about the same thing. They said the name of the president. And I'm old, so I'm talking about the prior president, not this guy. You'll notice that they formed crowds or groups. The blue people are all tightly tied together, but the red people are tied together, and they're not that tied to each other, right? Red and blue have some connections, but not that many. And if you look at the labels at the top of the groups, you'll see that these are the words used by the people in the group, and that these words are not the same. So people are talking about the same topic, but they are not talking about it in the same way. And we have a word for that in network theory. We call it homophily. Birds of a feather flock together. Like attracts like. People are attracted to people who resemble them. And so we see this in our data. These are the, you know, there aren't that many Americans on the call. So let me clarify something. In the United States, we have 2 political parties, a right-wing party and a far right-wing party. And so this is the right-wing party. These are the Democrats. And this is the far right-wing party, the Republicans. And so these are the people who think fascism is a perfectly legitimate form of politics. And these are the people who think that corporate capitalism is the only thing that we can possibly achieve. And you can see this because these people are talking about forward on climate, but these people are talking about the Tea Party and Rubio and top conservatives on Twitter and GOP. And so the message here is the shape of the crowd matters. And visualizing the social media crowd reveals insight that you, with a phone scrolling all day, even if you're taking notes, probably cannot do. We are not machines, but they are. And so in what way can we work together, the machines and the humans, to gain insight? Well, you know, sometimes the machines have generated images for us that need further refinement. It's true. And so in our team, we have worked on ways of taking these kinds of common network images and improve them. And we think that that's a possibility. This is the before, there's the after. And in this case, you can't quite see that there are different subgroups And now it's very clear. And there is a paper, a publication out there describing this form of network layout. And so I guess my point is just that there is a lot of room for improvement. Think about what photography looked like in, let's say, 1870. It was not as easy as taking out your iPhone, pointing it and pressing a button. It was difficult. Photography was a profession in 1870. Photography is now a casual action in 2021. And so what we're interested in is all of the different ways we might be able to draw a network, to draw the connections between people, and in particular, the collections of connections, more than just one connection, A connects to B, the collection of connections that are formed in some set of data. All the people who call each other, all the people who transfer money to each other, all the people who click on each other's websites. All of those things are networks. And we could see these networks in lots of different ways. And so that is one of the things that the NodeXL team is about. It's trying to present the data to you in a way that helps you comprehend it. So this idea of network, of dots and lines representing the relationships in a population, may or may not be familiar. It's not a commonly taught concept. We do use the words of network theory sometimes. In many languages, we have a phrase, friend of a friend, a phrase like word of mouth, or even the idea of like attracts like, or birds of a feather flock together. These are all actually network ideas. But beyond those phrases, we don't really teach networks, which is a shame, because networks are the way the universe organizes itself. It is true that the universe is made out of atoms, but you know, the thing about atoms is that they like each other, and the universe is also made out of molecules. And so we are really looking at the molecular structure of human populations. How do people connect to people? Now, this image is a cartoon. It is not data. You can find it on the web at that URL. But it is intended to convey some true points. And that is, and you may be familiar with all of these companies. These are 6 large technology companies. And the idea is that the culture of these companies is in some way, first, different from one another, and second, something that you could actually convey through just dots and lines. And so if you've ever worked in one organization and then gone to another organization and said to yourself, wow, this place is not like the old place. Like in the old place, nobody was allowed to talk to the boss. You had to go through channels. And in the new place, everybody talks to everybody. You may have had that experience. That's the kind of thing that's being conveyed here. I did spend 10 years working at Microsoft, and I must say the only thing that is inaccurate about this is the idea that each of the divisions is actually at war with each other. We used to say that the Cold War was actually, could Windows get along with Office? And the answer was no. So the only thing inaccurate about this diagram is that the weapons were much larger. They used long guns and howitzers and rifles and that kind of thing. Here, Google, everybody reports to everybody. Here at Apple, this is the Apple of Steve Jobs. Nobody's allowed to talk to anybody except Steve. And here at Oracle, the legal team is much larger than the engineering team. That's a joke. But the idea is that just dots, just lines, and we're conveying something sort of ineffable, something hard to convey, something social. And so what we would like to achieve is the creation of something like this. This is the point in the development of photography when photography stopped being exclusively a profession and started being a hobby. This is the Kodak Brownie snapshot camera for $5 US. They gave you this leather and wood box, and you could take 12 photographs with it. And then you brought it back to the chemists, and about 3 weeks later, they would give you 12 photographs in a new box. And this was Instagram 1.0. So this started a wave of amateur photography that ran from about 1911 to somewhere around 2006. I think it was 2006, 2008, the Kodak Film Company stops making film, right? It's the end of chemical photography. Chemical photography is now used for like X-ray machines and nothing else. So we would like to upgrade this idea. Maybe we could make it the disposable point and shoot camera, or even bring it into the digital world. But at some point we realized that this thing is obsolete. And what we really want to be is this. We would like to be the camera app on your phone, but a special kind of camera, a virtual camera. The kind of camera that takes pictures of crowds, but not physical crowds, virtual crowds. And it looks like this. This is Excel. It's NodeXL. We have a new menu in the ribbon. And what you're seeing is a spreadsheet and a visualization, two together. They're linked. If you click here, you light up things here. If you click here, they light up over here. And what it is doing is providing you with the ability to point into a virtual space, into a hashtag, into a YouTube video, into a wiki page, into a collection of Flickr photos, and bring back the set of interconnected things, to analyze it, to visualize it, to highlight who are the most important people, are there divisions, are there groups, what are the words being used. And so this ribbon in Excel is, we hope, everything you need to get data, analyze the data, visualize the data, publish the data. And that's an important point for our project. We don't just seek to collect the data for you or analyze it. We really want to help you discover insight. And then there's the last thing that we really want to help you do. Communicate the insight to somebody else. So it's not just discovery, it's communication. And so in NodeXL, the goal is to be almost like the camera app on your phone, which doesn't take a lot of training to use. You know, you hit the camera button, you turn it sideways, you point it at something, you do a little pinching, you press the button, you've taken a photograph. In NodeXL, it's a little similar, a little different. You start here in NodeXL Pro, you click on the import button. You get a list of different data sources that we could import from. I'm going to pick Twitter search network, and I get a dialog box. You type what you want to study here. This is the Twitter importer. We also have Flickr importers. We have a YouTube importer. Sadly, the Facebook importers have gone away because Mr. Zuckerberg turned them all off. But we do also have other sources of data like Flickr and YouTube and wikis and email. But we'll, in this session today, a lot of what we're going to show you are Twitter networks, but I do want to underscore the idea they do not all have to be Twitter networks. They can be YouTube, they could be Flickr, and in fact, they can even be from data sources that come from before the internet. I'll point you to the work of Dr. Diane Klein, C-L-I-N-E, Dr. Klein at George Washington University, who uses NodeXL to study the life and network of Alexander the Great Macedonian emperor. And Alexander the Great apparently did not have a Facebook page. He was more of an Instagram guy, but he did have a network. And that network is encoded in ancient Greek texts that say things like Alexander sent horses to Philip, at which point we have a connection from Alexander to Philip. And so my point is just that networks are everywhere, and you can bring them into NodeXL from almost anywhere, but we certainly do make it easier to get to social media data. And when you do your analysis, you're going to end up with something like this. It's a big network, and it's a big workbook with lots of worksheet tabs down here. There's about 14 of these tabs. And on each of these worksheets, you're going to get a dimension of your data: the people, the connections, the groups, the words, things over time, different dimensions of your data presented in different ways. And so in order to do this analysis, it turns out you have to do a lot of steps. It's not that different from, let's say, the refining of petroleum, right? You start off with crude oil, and you cook it and you boil it and you distill it, and off come pieces of data. There's the jet fuel, there's the diesel, out comes the gasoline, and so on. There are different pieces that are extracted from the raw petroleum inputs. We're similar. We're not made out of oil, but each of these steps has to be performed one step after the other. Usually one step depends on the step before it. And you may be thinking, wait a second, this is getting too complicated. Look at all these checkboxes. And for any one of these things, you might have other checkboxes. And for any of them, they may have their own checkboxes. And the good news here is NodeXL has a concept called recipes, or settings options files. We like to call them recipes. And the recipe is all of these checkboxes checked just the right way. And so you will see by the end of today's session that you don't have to know how to set all of these checkboxes, which is good because there's a lot of checkboxes. However, if you want to change the way all of these settings are set, you're welcome to. But what we will show you is that NodeXL, sort of the way that the iPhone camera or the Android camera, or maybe if you're old enough, you remember the word Polaroid, it allowed you to point and press a button and get a photograph. NodeXL will also let you point, press a button, and get a photograph. But these are all of the settings inside of NodeXL that are creating that photograph. It would be like saying, what is the focus? What is the white balance? What is the color adjustment? The anti-shake, all of those things are being done one after another in this list. And we call this process automate. NodeXL Pro Graph Automate Run. If you can go into that menu and press that button, it's going to do everything needed to make that map. And in fact, you can start an analysis, click the go button, go get a cup of tea, come back, and you will often have this report complete for you. And so it will generate a series of sheets in one big workbook. And one of those sheets will be the list of all the people in your data set. And in that worksheet, we will know things like how many people connect to them and how many people do they connect to, and how central are they? How much are they in the middle of the network? And all this other data that we also get from Twitter, like how many followers have they got? How many times do they tweet? What time zone are they in? So all this data just shows up as a spreadsheet, and it lets us sort by this column V, the between the centrality column, which essentially tells us who are the important people, who are the influencers. This is the edges worksheet. This is where connections are encoded. And so each row here is somebody did something with this person. Somebody connected from one person to another. And so this is the core concept of networks, the idea of the connection. And what you're seeing is row after row after row. It's a collection of connections. And so when you have a collection of connections, what you have is a network, and those connections may have happened at a different rate over time. So here we're seeing days and hours of the day. When did the event take place, and how often did somebody connect to another person? And this is where we enable you to do content analysis, sentiment analysis, because it is true that they are putting words in their tweets or in their messages. There are words, and it is often the case that you would like to know who used the angry words, who used the nice words. And it also is worth noting, your words might be in a different language. That's okay. Type them in the box. Your words may not merely be positive and negative. That's okay. Change the name of the list. So what other kinds of word lists other than positive and negative might be useful? Well, I'll give you an example. I like this example for if we were going to do the network analysis of the social media content related to automobiles, cars. We might not like the three categories, positive, negative, angry, violent. We might want three different categories. I like using categories for cars like performance, how fast a car is it? Economy, how affordable a car is it? Is it a cheap car? And safety, am I going to die in this car? And so you can have a safe car, a fast car, or a cheap car, but you usually can't have all three, right? A Tesla is fast and safe, but it's not cheap. A Honda is safe and cheap, but it's not fast. And so you have to make choices. And so you might want to replace positive, negative, angry, violent with performance, economy, and safety, and then come up with words associated with that. And you might choose to do that in a language other than American English, which is fine. And it's easy to find these words or make them up yourself, and you can simply type them in here. And a common question at this point is often, what about Unicode? Unicode is welcome. And so Hindi, Arabic, Urdu, you name it, we'll take it. Spanish with diacritic marks, all welcome. Just type them in right here. So this is one of the ways that you can customize your content analysis. But I will note that we do ship with a default list of American language, positive, negative, and angry, violent. And that means that, you know, for the British people on the call, color, you might spell color O-U-R at the end, and, you know, Americans spell it O-R at the end. So your language spellings may need to be modified. When you make one of these things, you often get a graph. You're going to get a graph, and you're going to get a report about who are the top influencers and what are the top hashtags. You're going to get top words, top URLs. And these reports don't all look the same. They have different shapes. And these shapes are important to us. We want you to discover these shapes with us. And we imagine all of you, each of you, being one of these receiver dishes, spreading out across the world, taking pictures of the hashtags or wiki pages or YouTube videos that matter to you, and revealing the shape of the network around them. And we have found that this approach is working. We encourage you to click on scholar.google, typing in the search term NodeXL. If you go to scholar.google.com, you'll find a big list of publications. And we are very pleased to say that we're on our way to almost 9,000 publications. I think Wasim mentioned over 7,000. That's just a little bit ago. We're now seeing almost 800, 900 papers a year being published using NodeXL. And that's really a source for us of great satisfaction. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to help you all go and collectively create a kind of atlas of social cyberspace so that we can actually know, what does a hashtag look like? Is this a normal hashtag? Is this normal for this hashtag? What makes it abnormal? Can we detect the difference between normal and abnormal? And so we are the Social Media Research Foundation. You can find us on the web at smrfoundation.org. And I encourage you to come visit the website. There are tutorials, there are data sets, there's a lot of material up there. But I'd also like to direct your attention to NodeXL graphgallery.org. And this is the place where people who are using NodeXL, which is a virtual camera, take a photograph and then want to publish that photograph somewhere on the internet. So this is a kind of Instagram for graphs. It's Instagraph. We're not going to call it that because we don't have a legal budget to defend ourselves from Mr. Zuckerberg. But Instagram for graphs, it's a place where you can go and look for graphs. And I'll point you to this part of the page. This is the search text box. And if you were to type in a topic of interest to you, you may find that one or more data sets already exist. Other users may have uploaded those data sets. And when you look at these different data sets, what I hope you'll see is, again, this point, they're not all the same. They vary in terms of structure, like this rectangle shape. Here it is, there's a little one here, there's a little one there, there's a bigger one, rectangle, 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 rectangle. What's the rectangle? And look, no rectangles. What's with that? No rectangle. And this one has a rectangle. What is the rectangle? Well, that's the isolate cluster. That's the rows and columns of people who have no connections. And what about this thing, this round thing, round thing, round thing, round thing? I see a round thing in a lot of these things. Not all of them have round things, but they have, a lot of them have round things. What's the round thing? That's the wagon wheel, the hub and spoke. These are the indicators of broadcasters, the people who tweet and get lots of retweets. That's what this looks like when you tweet and get lots of retweet. And an important note to make, of the people who all retweeted this one person, did they connect to each other? No. And so this network structure is the structure of audience. When I sit down in a theater, when a year ago I used to sit down in theaters, maybe in a year I'll sit down in a theater again. If I sit down next to you in that theater, there's a good chance that we didn't come together and we don't want to talk to each other. We're just in an audience. You know, I'm here to watch that movie, you're here to watch that movie, we don't want to talk to each other. And that's a lot what we're seeing in these wheels, these circles. These are groups of people who share a common link to a common point, but don't connect to each other. And so the difference in these shapes, let's go back a second. The difference in these shapes is important. It tells us about the fact that not all crowds are the same. A bus station or a train station is different from an auditorium, different kind of crowd. It's different than, let's say, a dinner table. These are different kinds of crowds. They have different patterns of interaction with one another. And we can actually visualize those patterns. And what we're seeing is that at the lowest possible level, all social media creates networks, because all social media is about passing some object from one person to another. I liked your photograph. I retweeted your tweet. I replied to your email. And so everything you do on the internet is encoding a connection from you to somebody else. And when you do it, you're leaving footprints in the sand. You're leaving data behind. So that's the Pacific. It's my ocean, not far from here. And if you look at the footprints in the sand, how many people were here? Which way did they go? How long ago was it? Can't be more than about 12 hours because the tide will come in and wash it all away. Did they come with vehicles? Did they come with animals? Did they come in a crowd or one at a time? Did they come in pairs? You can learn a lot by looking at the footprints in the sand. But sand is silicon, and silicon is used to make microprocessors, silicon chips. And so when you take the sand and you turn it into a computer, you suddenly get more than just footprints in the sand. You get computational footprints, and we can analyze them. And so almost all of those footprints are actually in the form of ties, links, associations, connections, bonds, relationships, connections. And most of the swipes, taps, clicks that we do each day are to send, mention, like, link, reply, rate, review, favorite, friend, follow, forward, edit, tag, comment, check in. Every time you do those things, you are creating a connection, a link, a tie. And there are many kinds of ties. And so each of the different platforms create different kinds of ties. In a wiki, I link from one page to another. In a blog, I link from one blog post to another. In Twitter, I reply from one tweet to another. In Facebook, I get to like your post or comment on it. Same for Flickr, I get to like your photos. And so each of these different platforms contain at least one kind of connection, and often more than one, because I can thumbs up, or I can thumbs down, or I can say wow, or something like that. All of these things are different kinds of connections. And so what we are interested in doing is turning social media into a connection, into a tie, to recognize that all those messages contain information about connection, and that this is sometimes referred to as the 5 W's, or the journalistic question: who did what, with whom, when, and where. How did A connect to B? Did B connect to A back? Or were they mutually connected? And when we do this, we like this phrase, think link. We want you to think link, to think about the ways in which A is connected to other things, not just the attributes of A. Like, how tall is A, and how much money does she have, and what is her educational attainment, and how many times does she go to the grocery store? That's all interesting. We'll take it. That's great. But what we also want to know is, who does she go to the grocery store with? Or who does she deliver food to? Or who brings food to her? Those are relationship questions, not just attributes of entities. And so it's worth noting that these relationships can flow in one direction, and they can flow backwards, but they don't always have to be of equal magnitude. I call my mother once in a while, but she calls me every week. And so there's an imbalance in the relationship. And of course, some relationships are mutual, or they should be. It's one thing to say that I lend money to people, and usually the people I lend money to do not lend me money. It's funny that way. But there is the relationship is married to, and if you find that you are married to somebody who is not married to you, we recommend counseling. You're not supposed to be able to do that. So in order to do this yourself, we want you to be able to write an edge. How do you write one edge? Basically, it's vertex 1, vertex 2, things about the connection, things about vertex 1, things about vertex 2. This is it, a row in a spreadsheet. Person name 1, person name 2, things about the connection, things about the person, things about the other person. And so that's what it looks like as a spreadsheet. This is person name 1, person name 2, what kind of connection, when did it happen, what was in it, were there URLs, what was the date. It's who did what, with whom, when, and where, sometimes known as the journalistic question. And so we just want you to know that each of these questions goes to a different place in the spreadsheet. And that most of these things are edge attributes, but we could also have things like how many followers of vertex 1, how many followers of vertex 2, those would be vertex attributes. Because, you know, a vertex has follower accounts, an edge doesn't. So when we look at the data, we often find patterns. We've seen this before. We saw the wagon wheel, we saw the rectangle shape, and we have come up with names for all of these shapes that we've seen. And I do want to note, we are showing you 6 of these network structures. Does that mean there is not a 7th? No, there could be 10. We don't know. These are the ones we've seen and can document. And perhaps you will see a pattern that we have not seen, and that's fine. We are actually looking forward to that. But what we want is data. You know, if a physicist comes back and says, I've created something that is an atom and it's beyond plutonium, it's Einsteinium or rubidium or Berkeleyium or I don't know, fermium, or they come up with names. And all you have to do is prove it. And we're all for it. If you can show us a network pattern that comes from naturally occurring data, and it isn't one of these 6 patterns, we will make room and add you to the list. But at the moment, we've seen these, and we haven't seen another one. We haven't seen number 7 yet. And, you know, I should also caveat and say, these are the patterns we see in Twitter. We don't see these patterns in wikis. These are the patterns we see in Twitter. We do see these patterns in email. We do see these patterns in discussion boards. And so there's something that is necessary to get these patterns, and that is reply. If you can't reply, you don't get these patterns. If you can reply, you often get these patterns. And so just to put a boundary around our claims, these are observations of Twitter. We have validated that these observations also work in email and in discussion boards, but we're not making these claims as the 6 basic patterns in all networks. These are reply-based, and in this case, particularly Twitter-based. You can read more about those 6 kinds at this URL, pewinternet.org, mapping Twitter topic networks from polarized crowds to community clusters. I think you've gotten the link. I may have shared it with you. It's very Googleable. If you type in Pew Research and NodeXL, usually this thing pops up. And this thing basically says, when you look at the maps, you're going to see some shapes. And the shape that you will see often is this hub and spoke pattern, in which the spokes don't really connect to the other spokes. But it's not the only pattern. But it is a pattern that means something. It means audience. It means broadcast. It does not mean community. When you see this shape, that's not a community, that's an audience. And it is impossible for an audience to be a community, because a community would have to have lots of connections to each other, not just like sitting in an audience looking at a speaker. Other shapes exist. There are the bridges that connect otherwise separated clusters in the graph, and these are often the influencers. There's my bridge, that's the Golden Gate Bridge. There we are, the San Francisco Bay Area. Someday when people travel again, I encourage you to come visit our bridge. But the reason a bridge is that it's really hard to get to the other side any other way. And bridges exist in human populations. These are the people who connect to a group that almost nobody else connects to. And so one piece of advice that comes from network theory is be a bridge. Try to connect to people in a group separate from your own. But there are also these people, the islands, the isolates, the people with zero connections to anybody else. You may know them with the term loser, but no, we don't think they're losers. They are simply people who said some word, but didn't say somebody's name, and nobody said their name. And so they are what we sometimes refer to as the periphery. They are the lowest level of engaged participants. They said the word once and that's it. And they didn't talk to anybody and nobody talked to them. By themselves, they seem unimportant. But as we saw before, in aggregate, the size of the big rectangle of disconnected people actually tells us something very important about the nature of the content. It tells us how much is it a brand? How much is it a public topic? So what do we want to know? We've got these buckets of data and there are these phenomena happening out there on the web. What do we want to know? I would argue that we want to know the shape and structure and dynamics of these spaces. We might want to know when does something suddenly change? And what are the conditions for stability and instability? If we wanted to defend a discussion, how would we do that? And if we wanted to disrupt a discussion, how would we do that? Not all discussions are valid. So I think we've seen this before, but this is basically an overview of what NodeXL is going to do. It's a combination of two techniques. It starts with connection and then it moves to content. It does not start with content. And that's a big distinguisher. This is one of the ways that we are very different from a lot of other systems. We start with looking at content as if it encodes connection, not as if it was a bag of words to be done to do frequency analysis. So this is one of the ways that is made clear. We start in row 1, and many approaches to social media analysis start in row 3. They start with the words. We do not start with the words. We look at the words and realize that the words represent connections. And we then look at the connections to tell us about the shape of the crowd and the clusters that form. And so once we have clusters, we are in a position to actually talk about market segments. And so market segments are important. Market segments let us know that not everybody's talking about the same thing in the same way. And so we would like to be able to identify those clusters. And you'll pardon me as I get rid of Skype just a moment. Oh man, and it won't let me get rid of Skype. Okay. Let me just ask this person to contact me later. All right. Okay. Anyway, sorry for the interruption. So we are interested in these 6 steps. We start with content that lets us see connection. We form clusters. Then we do the content analysis. Then we're going to look at the shape of the crowd, and we're going to look at the leaders of that, and we're going to convert the leaders. We're going to recognize the fact that there's a very small part of the population who are the thought leaders, the influencers. And network theory teaches us that it's less than 1% of the population. That there's usually 10 or 15 people at the center of every hashtag. And they are the influencers, and they are the people that we would want to engage in order to shape the conversation. These are the people at the center of our network. So these are our steps. We have to get you data. And we have data importers. And of course, you can bring data as well. If you have been reading ancient Greek texts and building a spreadsheet of who said what to whom, when, and where, we're happy to import your spreadsheet. But we also will get you Twitter and YouTube and Flickr and Wiki and other kinds of data. We then perform network analysis. Network analysis identifies the mayor or the influencer, the leader, the thought leaders. And then we do content analysis. Then we draw a picture, and then we write a report. And we do this because we would rather you spend your time over here than over here, which is to say, this becomes a form of visual anthropology, visual sociology, where the focus is on the visual and not on the making of the visual. So if you went out with a camera and took a lot of photographs, perhaps you're an anthropologist, you visit a new culture, you take a lot of pictures. The pictures are the artifacts of interpretation. You didn't spend your time building cameras. And so that's our goal. So here is a network, and I think this is the point I think that differentiates a network approach from a standard approach. Network analysis comes in 3 levels, whereas a typical content analysis only has 1. The bag of words. How often does some word appear is the typical approach. Here, what we are able to do is bring in 3 levels of analysis: the individual, the group, and the graph. And so the micro, the meso, the macro. And so the network level is the everybody, the population, the global, how many people, how many connections, how many separate clusters. That's the view of the all, the global view. But then there's a group level, which is similar, but now a subregion. Who is the leader of that group? What is its shape? How many people are in it? How connected are they? And then there is the lowest level, the individual. Here's a person. What group are they in? How many connections have they got? What words do they use? That kind of thing. And so each of these resolutions, starting at the graph as a whole, going to the group level, and then down to the individual level. These are the 3, the macro, the meso, the micro, the micro, the meso, the macro, the 3 levels of analysis. And so each of those dots in the graph has its own network attribute. It has a position. And so here's a pretty simple, basic network, relatively small. We have our own. This is the alphabet network, just made up dots, given them letters. Some of them have connections. What I'd like to do is walk through the same network, only we will change the color and the size of the dot depending on how we want to count. So for example, let's change the size and the color of the dot depending on how many lines touch the dot. There we go. Now we can see that Z has a lot of connections, A has a lot of connections, but I has only 1. I connects to H, that's it. K connects to J, that's it. But O has a lot of connections, but A has more, Z has the most. But the number of connections, which you could call popularity, is not the only measure of importance. We might also have a measurement called betweenness centrality. So let me go up and back here. So that's how many connections have I got? This is how would the graph break into separate fragments if I leave? And notice something. Look at O. O has a lot of connections. O is a big red dot in this view, in the measurement degree. O is no longer big. Why is O no longer big? O has a lot of connections, but if O leaves the network, is any part of the graph disconnected? No. What if F leaves the network? What happens to the network? That cluster around A floats away, G, H, I, J, K, it floats away, and the rest of it sort of sits there. So it fragments into 3 pieces. The person who, if they leave, causes the most fragmentation is the most influential person. They are the betweenness person. They are the gatekeeper. They are the bridge. They are the keystone, the linchpin. They are the broker. They are the connector. And this is how, in network theory, we define influence. It's, are you this dot? Are you this dot? And not that dot. Now, you may, for other reasons, prefer to identify this dot. I've got a number for you. It's degree. That's how many lines connect to you. But if you're looking for influence, you might prefer betweenness centrality. And I've got more. How about this? This is how far are you from all the other dots? We call it closeness centrality. And then there's this, how connected are you to people who have a lot of connections? That's sort of like, do you know an influencer? This is how connected are you to people who have a lot of connections? And this is how connected are, how many, let me put it this way. How many of your friends are friends with your friends? How dense is your cluster? And so these are different ways of measuring a dot in a graph. And we want you to be able to use these different metrics to pick people out of your population who are now important by some definition of importance, because not everybody is equally important by all definitions. And there is not only one definition of importance. And so if you want the well-connected, these are the well-connected. If you would like the strategically connected, the influential, these are those people. So NodeXL seeks to deliver for you a data analysis workflow from the collection of the data to the storage of it, the analysis, visualization, and publication. So we have a series of what we could call spigots, water taps, data providers, and those include Twitter and email and Flickr and YouTube and now wikis. Used to be Facebook, no longer. And there was a list. There's a list of different data sources that you can get data from. And again, I'll note that if you just have data in a spreadsheet, we probably can import that as well. You have to put your data somewhere. You need a data bucket. We use Excel. You may be familiar with Excel. It may be a lot easier to work with than a database, and that's why we use Excel. Then we need to essentially grind your data. We have to refine it, improve it, increase its value. And to do that, we calculate all those metrics that we've just talked about at the individual, the group, and the graph, or the global level. And those metrics include things like degree and betweenness and eigenvector centrality. And you can see them all here. Things like how many of the people you connect to connect back to you. That's called reciprocity. And so each of these metrics measure something about where you are in your graph and how many connections you have and the nature of those connections. And then, of course, data visualization is a very important part of this because it is otherwise difficult to find the pattern without drawing the pattern. And of course, we will draw the pattern for you so that you can see the shape of the crowd, to see, does it have an isolate cluster? The brand, group of people with no connections? Does it have a hub and spoke, a broadcaster? Does it have a polarized crowd, two groups that don't want to talk to each other? And so these things are important because eventually your goal, we believe, is publication, that you want to share the insight with someone else. You want to convey these ideas to others. And so for that reason, we have the NodeXL Graph Gallery, and the role of those reports is to convey who are the key influencers, what are the subgroups, where are the bridges, and also what kind of content is being exchanged. This enables a lot of research. It means that suddenly it is possible to take a picture of a hashtag, to take a picture of a topic, and to identify the key people, the leaders, the divisions, the issues in that discussion. So all social media has social networks. If you have social media without a social network, it's not social media. What is it? It's digital media, but unless it encodes connections between people, or at least entities, it's not a network, and it's not social media then. And if you encode networks, those networks generate shapes, and some shapes are better than others. And certain positions within those shapes are better than others for some purposes. Some people are more influential. So Wasim, do you think we should take a break at this point? Is that where we're at?
Yep. So it's 2:30, and perhaps we can have a 10-minute rest break and then get Harold to do some of the practical overview.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So perhaps we could have a quick break and resume in 10 minutes.
Very good. All right. Well, and I guess I'll just note, if students are having any issues or have questions, this is a good time to use the chat and address them in that context. So go ahead if you have questions, hit us in the chat. And I think, let's see if we can find the chat. Where did the chat go? There it is. We will monitor the chat and keep an eye out for you there. But otherwise, I guess we'll see you in about 10 minutes, okay? All right, I think we're about to welcome everyone back. And I'll hand it over to Wasim, who will then hand it to Harold, I think.
Hi, yep. So our third speaker is Harold, who'll be giving you some practical tips and a practical overview of importing, analyzing, and visualizing data in NodeXL Pro. So I'll hand over to Harold for that.
Yeah, thanks, Wasim. All right, let's get started. So yeah, this is my practical overview. And I would start again with a more detailed overview of the key features of NodeXL Pro. And well, Mark has already shown us or told us that task automation with NodeXL Pro data recipes is actually the key feature. But there are so many other features within that are available. So we cannot really go into much detail, but just to give you an overview. Here is, so the data import section allows to import any kind of network data you have in an Excel file or use the INET file. GEXIF files or GDF files are very common network files. Also, you can import these and also later on export these data files or data types. Our data importers that we have are well, we have two Twitter importers, we have Wikipedia importers that are very, well, rather sophisticated. You can do a lot of different kinds of networks with Wikipedia. And we have the YouTube importers that have been updated just last year. We did a major update. We can now look at, well, discussion networks very well, and also at video recommendation networks. And also we have a Flickr importer that's available for tag networks, and it's not really that deep of analysis possible for Flickr, but we get data, we can visualize networks from that. So the part of network analysis, so that's with several parts. So we have the calculations about the overall network. We can say well, how big is the network, well, how dense is it. We have some key indicators like the density and modularity. And then we have the cluster analysis, where we usually use Clausen-Newman-Moore clustering algorithm. There are two other algorithms that are possible to use, but usually we stick to this one because it will generate rather larger groups than the other one that we have. Then we have all these vertex metrics that can be analyzed. And so down here we have the path analysis, which is in beta version currently. We have been working on this for a while now, and we keep on working. And so this is one of the major, major social media things that we can take a look at. Well, what does well, especially in Twitter, what path paths do certain tweets go? Because somebody tweets, somebody replies to it, and a reply gets retweeted, and another reply to a reply is written, and then you get these tangled webs that you can decipher with path analysis. Content analysis, yeah, I will show you that in a couple of minutes. Let's go further to the practical side here. We have a couple of tutorials available. So most important is how to automate NodeXL Pro, and I will show you how to do that just shortly. And the other one is social network and content analysis of Twitter network data step by step. So all these steps that are automated, they obviously have small single steps that have to be taken one by one. And I will also show you how this works. Yeah, you can go to our website, smrfoundation.org. Well, just a second. So, well, just to point you to two pages on our website. So automation. This is the place where you can download the data recipes, but they are also already stored here in our Google folder. So you can download this zip file. And then, well, unzip it and save it to your machine. And then next, we will import these recipes into NodeXL. But before we get to the Twitter stuff, let's take another look at well, other network tools and where to get data. And so NodeXL and Gephi makes a very good connection, especially when networks get very large. So Gephi has more capacities. On the other hand, Gephi cannot do any content analysis. But our colleague Mika Leiti, he has done some tutorials as well on how you can convert NodeXL data into Gephi data. And yeah, so the question is always where do we get these data? What are the data sources? And besides the integrated NodeXL data importers, well, you can get this data from almost any social media platform that has an API. There are also other places, so like there's the Digital Methods Initiative at the University of Amsterdam, and they offer also a lot of network data sets. Yeah, it's a very good place to further look at what's possible with network data. And well, obviously there's network data all over the world, and there are databases, and it just needs to be formatted into network data, and that's what you see here on the right. Actually, all you need is a table, well, a vertex table. We'll call it the edge table, the vertex 1, vertex 2. This is the connection. So if we look at a social network of these people, this is we can populate this this table by hand, but just by typing in. And if we have this edge table, we can create the vertex table on that, so which just shows all the persons in this connection table. And if it's possible, we can add, well, any further columns to either the edges table or the vertex table. And that means this is metadata that we can make use of. And well, the more metadata you have, the more powerful your network analysis gets. And Twitter is very generous with this metadata compared to other platforms. And we will take a look at what's available there just a minute. So I've prepared, so before we look at Twitter, it's good to understand how this works. So if we can use just well, our own hands to create edges. So let's say we have here Kyle is friends with Stan, and well, Stan is friends with Kenny, and let's say Kenny is friends with Cartman, for example. And so we've got just a couple of connections, and then we can click show graph, and here we see not really that much to see yet, but this is how you can start any analysis, any network data set. Up here, we have the basic control options for vertices and edges. Currently, we have the shape disk. There are different shapes that you can set. You can drop a shadow also for these for the vertices. Main color currently is black. Let's go to green, and edges are currently gray. Well, we can make this orange maybe. Click OK, and we'll refresh. And you see now this has changed. And this gives you the basic controls, so control over the whole network. But this is just the starting point. When these networks get very large, then we have the option to autofill columns. And that means you can populate all these columns that are seen here, the edges spreadsheet, like color, width, style, opacity, visibility, labels. So there are really lots of options for you to customize any network data set. And the same is also true for the vertices spreadsheet. So here are also lots of options. And sometimes if you don't see these columns here, they may be hidden. So up here, you can look at show height. And well, currently all available columns are shown all the way to the right. And if you can hide these also to get a better overview of these. I have prepared this data set a little further. So if we can just add a couple of more connections between these guys. So this is obviously South Park, maybe some South Park fans around there. And here I've defined the coloring. So if these are friendships, let's say, so the label is friends with, or this is a relationship. These are friends with, and maybe Matt Stone, Mr. creates South Park, and also Trey Parker. So we can just gather a couple of these edges, and then I can say show graph, and it just takes a second. To show you what's possible here, you see the images, and where do I get these images? I just put them in this column here. Just a second. So these are online sources from image files from Wikipedia. And if you do any kind of research where you want to show maybe companies or organizations, then it's good to have images from either Wikipedia that you can use. For example, let's go to Stan and click here on Stan, and then you see up here, this is the image file, and you can just copy and paste this in here. And you can point to maybe Facebook profile images, Twitter profile images. So this is just to give you an idea of what's possible. You have full control over size and coloring, labeling. It's all in here. It just depends on how you populate these columns. Okay, just as a starting point, let's now move on to Twitter data. And I've pointed you to this tutorial. So this is the automation, and this is the recipe bundle down here. And if you download that and unzip it to your machine, it is then accessible through this section here. This is options, import. Click on import, and then you navigate to this zip file you've just unzipped. And so this is here the list of data recipes that we have. There are two for Flickr, sentiment analysis, and what can be done for Twitter. There are some tutorial recipes that I've created for semantic networks, for example, for the sentiment visualization. And what is a standard recipe for Twitter, you can see here. So Twitter user network 01 standard, large and very large with shapes. So they all perform the same steps, but they have different visualizations. So I will show you this now to import. Let's use this standard recipe. Just double click, and you see really nothing happens. But just to be sure, a lot has happened. So clicking on automate, for example, shows us all the stuff that's the steps that are in here. So that's really the first thing that you need to do to run a network analysis on Twitter data. Click on options, import, select either one of these Twitter user network recipes, double click, and it's in here. And now we need to further customize this recipe, and you can go to import options, And here we can make another check mark. If you click on that, it means that after the data is downloaded, it will start with the analysis and task automation right away. And clicking on this one is again the automation window. And what we want to do here is now we want to show or want to tell the recipe where the data should be saved. And if you click on this here, click once more for this check mark and then options. And from there, you can select the place where all data recipes, or where all the data sets will be stored. And this is my standard folder here, just point to NodeXL and save image to file. And in this case, I want to export the file also to NodeXL Graph Gallery. These are export options. And now this is customized to my machine. I just click OK and OK. And here's another button that says use current for new. And if I click on that, this recipe will be loaded every time you open up NodeXL. But this is not saved yet. Well, it's saved within the options here, and I really don't want to confuse you. But once more, we now click export this file because it's now customized to my machine. This is this data recipe, and I add to the name PC. And now this means this data recipe is ready to use. So let's get some Twitter data. Up here, you see Twitter user network and tweet ID list network and Twitter search network. Those are three importers. And we will just start with Twitter search network. And if this is the first time you're using NodeXL, you first need to allow NodeXL to go to your Twitter account. So you need a Twitter account to download data. It will go through your own account. That's why you need to authorize NodeXL. And well, let's say we just want to download some data for hashtag DataViz. And I make this a little smaller to make this just 1,000 tweets. The maximum is 18K. So well, now just click OK and let this run. The recipe is running. And I can, while that's happening, this will take about 15 minutes or so. I will give you some further insights here. So yeah, about these Twitter data importers. They connect to the official APIs of Twitter. So for the search network that I just started, we get a maximum of 18K tweets per search. And the time frame that you can get data from is just the past 8 to 9 days from before the date of the query. Usually you get at least 95, 96, maybe 99% of all tweets, maybe sometimes also 100%. So that's how the API behaves. So you get a very large portion of tweets. But if there's a trending topic and you get 18,000 tweets, maybe just for a time frame of 1 or 2 minutes. So if you watch the Super Bowl that's coming up, and well, you just search for Super Bowl during the Super Bowl, and then you get maybe 1 minute or less than a minute with 18K tweets. So keep that in mind. So it's also very important to start with a correct query design, and I have a link here to a blog post that's very helpful. And there are lots of search operators that you can use for your query. So that's the search network. And then we also have the users network. And in this case, we don't have the date restriction. Well, this means you can enter a list of any list of Twitter handles, or you can access a user list that has been created by a Twitter user. And you can get a maximum of 3,200 tweets per user. And well, this just depends on how frequently a user has tweeted. So for 3,200 tweets, for some you get the whole history. For others, for maybe a bot or so, maybe this is just 1 or 2 days. It might be possible that sometimes the download stops for 15 minutes and then it will resume again. So these are all limitations of the Twitter API, and we cannot do anything about it. And I'd like to point out that we're combining these two Twitter importers. Well, is really the way to get into very deep insights. So the Twitter search can be used for like laying out, throwing out a fishnet and well, finding out some patterns. And if you want to take a closer look at patterns, you create your own list of users and then put that list of users in the Twitter users network importer. And well, then take a very close look what these users have been tweeting about. So the query design is very important. So, well, this example uses well, the Tesla queries. So, for example, if you just want to know what people are talking about when they tweet the word Tesla, well, you just enter this the word itself. Maybe if you're interested in just the autopilot of Tesla, you can use quotation marks. And well, obviously Tesla is not all about cars. Nikola Tesla, well, he is then the main reference for the car, but people may be talking about Nikola Tesla. And you can exclude these tweets about Nikola Tesla if you just want to look at the car brand Tesla. You can also build queries with Boolean operators. So in this case, with how do people talk about electric cars or electric vehicles? This would be one query like this. Well, then Tesla itself, they have their own Twitter account, and if you use the @ sign, you will only get tweets that are directed at Tesla. You can obviously also use the hashtag, just hashtag Tesla as you like. Well, with these global brands and the global discussions, it sometimes may be helpful to filter the data by language. So with the language operators, lang, column en for English, but fr is French, de is German, and l is Netherlands. There's also UND, that's undefined. So if Twitter cannot figure out the language, that happens mostly when images are shared without text, you can just only look for these images. And also the search date operators, they can help you to download just a couple of days from the past 8 to 9 days. If you use from, and it's not, I think it's a mistake, it's since and until. When including these, you just maybe want to have data from yesterday, and this is then from 2021 January 17th and until 19th, and you just get 24 hours. Another very interesting operator is the list operator. So, well, let's just quickly look at Twitter and look for a list. So C-SPAN is one good source of lists. So you can find these clicking on here, view lists, and then you see all the lists that have been created by C-SPAN. And so they have lots of political lists here. So members of Congress, for example, we click on that. You see up here, there's a list ID. And if you copy and paste this just into your importer, let's see, Twitter search. So this then would be list, column, and the ID, and then you will only download tweets by users that are on this particular list. If this is a very large list, then you can further add more search terms. So maybe just what are they then talking about the capital, for example. So yeah, this is the list analysis. And as you see currently, this is still running. This is the recipe that's still running. Give it a little more time. And so this is something that I want to point you also at. This is the data that's available from Twitter. So this is, I've downloaded 1,000 tweets for hashtag data this just before the session. So we can take a look at. So this has not been processed at all. This is a raw data. This is exactly what Twitter gives us. And you see the Twitter data here is, yeah, vertex 1. It's a connection, who tweets to whom. So in this case, we have a self loop. This is nobody else mentioned in this tweet. This was tweeted yesterday at 1 p.m. And well, here's the column with the tweet. And then, well, what NodeXL does is extracts URLs within the tweet that you can see in this column. From that, only the domains of the URLs that are embedded are extracted. And then further to the right, we see the hashtags that are within this tweet. Well, a column that points us to the media in the tweet, tweet image, so timing. There's really lots of data that you get. Tweets you get some lat and long, and that's very rare these days. Maybe less than 1% of the users they tweet their location, a tweet location. They will open this up to the API. Some do. Most of the users don't. We have the imported ID, and well, there's a language column, possibly sensitive, that's not populated here. So is this a quoted ID? Was this retweeted? Well, lots of columns in here. And that's just the edges spreadsheet. If we look at the vertices spreadsheet, you can also see the metadata about the users. So, and it starts with the name here. There's a unique user ID, and then, well, the number of, how many users are followed, how many followers there are for that user, how many tweets have been sent out ever by this user, how many favorites are there. Then we have the user's self-description in here. They will also show the location. Well, it's a self-described location, so some people might just say, well, I'm from London or Austin, Texas. Others say universe or Earth or some stuff that won't make much sense, but that's how it works. But we can do a pretty good geographic analysis from this. Then here is the web, the embedded link from the self-description, time zone, the date when the user joined Twitter, and also some other indicators here. So how many times is such a user on a list? And we sort this by list count, and you see, well, usually the very popular accounts up here. So the NBA, Financial Times. So these are probably all accounts that ring a bell for you. And yeah, so this is the raw data. And I believe now, here you go. This is what has happened in the background while I was talking. So this was the instance of NodeXL, where I entered hashtag dataviz. And the recipe was running now for maybe 10 minutes. And here's the network, the full network analysis that we have. And when we once again now look at this data set, and you see then all the way to the right, there are new columns that have been added. And one of the first and main steps about this analysis is the calculation of edge weight. That's done with this step, count and merge duplicate edges. You click on that, then it's OK, and then that's how this gets populated. And we sort the edge weight, then you see here, this is the strongest connection between two users. So bot female has connected to Daniela Keen 10 in 18 tweets. This is the relationship strength. And then the cluster algorithm that's run, that's up here under groups. And then you can create groups by vertex attribute also, or by connected component, by motive, but we usually use cluster. So the cluster algorithm does find then subcommunities in these data sets. And there are 3 available. We usually use Closet-Newman-Moore. Vakita Tsurumi also works very well. Gervin-Newman is a bit slower, but they all do their job. But the Closet-Newman-Moore tends to have little bigger clusters than the other ones. So these are the clusters that are found. And so vertex 1, vertex 2 group, these are the clusters. So this vertex, this group, this user here is in vertex group 2. And the connected one is also in vertex group 2. Well, sometimes there are connections that go across groups. So let's see. Most of that goes within. So you don't see that many connections between the groups. Let's see, for example, here. Okay, so a little hard to with this data set, but that's for you to understand how the clustering algorithm works. So if it's the users have been clustered, and if you just want to take a look at a certain group, so here where we first sort by betweenness centrality, and so who is highest betweenness centrality overall that we see here. But well, oops, let's go further to the right, and well, let's just only look at group 1. And so this is how we filter. And we see the hierarchy of the influential users just in this group. And it takes a little while to figure out your way around these data sets. But you have to keep in mind it's all about columns and that are populated automatically. And it's not only the clusters that we have here. There are many columns that represent the text analysis of this data set. And if we go to graph metrics, and here is words and word pairs. Mark has shown that before. So we have these different lists of words. So this is list 1, list 2, list 3. This is positive, this is negative. These words are all skipped. And here in these on the spreadsheets, you see on edges spreadsheet, vertices spreadsheet, group spreadsheet, they all have been extended with a couple of columns related to the sentiment lists. So positive words, let's sort by positive. So 5 positive words on this list in this certain tweet. By a connection, let's go back here. Show all the groups again. So in this case, well, this number is higher because there are several tweets by the user, and this is then the sum of positive words. And also, if you go further to the right, the sum of negative words. And yeah, the same thing can be seen on the group level. But it's not only the words that have been counted, it's also well, top URLs in this group, top domains, top hashtags, and all these top top items that can be viewed on the network top items spreadsheet. So well, this is then well the essence of the content analysis. So first, the cluster algorithm finds these groups, and then the content analysis is run on the overall level. But it's more interesting then to further look into these single groups. So what are then the top URLs in G1, or this is then in G2? Top 10 groups are shown here with a count. So it looks like in group 2, there are much more URLs shared than in group 1. So right here, Python AI. So it might be the tweets about, yeah, it's data science, mostly about Python, probably machine learning, coding. So this group looks very much different than this one. And it's not only the URLs, it's also the hashtags. If we go down, the hashtags by group, we have the group count. And yeah, this is yeah, the core of the content analysis. Because you have to ask yourself, why are the clusters clustered this way? Why did the algorithm find these structures? And then the answer is found in the contents. One group is talking about totally different things than the other group, and that shows us how different these groups are. And you figure that out by looking at the content analysis of these groups. Then another feature we have is the time series analysis. So this is 1,000 tweets. This just goes back 1 or 2 days. And well, this is on a day level. We can, let's see, graph metrics, deselect, and we only run time series again. Not by days, by the hour. And we create a unique edge by the imported ID, because several edges are created by, maybe created by one tweet. And here you go. It's to see how the well, distribution here over time over the past 2 days. That's time series analysis. And yeah, so this is now the basic walkthrough for these analytical steps. And in the end, we can export to Graph Gallery, which has already happened. So that was also part of the data recipe. If you go to NodeXL Graph Gallery, well, here it is. So that's the one that just was created on my machine and was automatically uploaded to the gallery. And yeah, these report pages, they have, well, they just show the data a little differently than what's already in these spreadsheets here, especially on the top item, network top items spreadsheet. That you can see here, right here. This is a description of the network data set. Let's look at top hashtags, and here you see well, an overview of what top hashtags by G1, G2, G3. Look at the domains that are shared, what the top words that I use. Oh, actually, that's one that I forgot. The word pairs and word pairs analysis. They also create 2 spreadsheets, and there is, well, the frequency of any word or a hashtag in here. The salience is calculated. well, show an overall, and if you go further down, you can also filter this by group. And same thing happens here on the word pairs page. So with NodeXL, we will just look for any word pairs. Well, it will remove all the skip words that are defined in the skip words list. And then here we get another edge list. This then can be also used, copied and pasted to a new network data set. And then you can run a semantic analysis of the contents. I have tutorial about semantic networks right here. So if you have the time to take a look at that. So this is what then a semantic network may look like. Usually they are very, very dense, but it depends on the underlying data set. So this could be like an additional step if you look at Twitter network data set on the user level, and then on the semantic level. That might help you some pointers for understanding your data. And okay, I will go back to my presentation here. So yeah, once more. So we had the question in the chat a little earlier. So what are we seeing here? So the vertex or the nodes, every image here, everything you see is a Twitter user. And the relationships that allow us to form these networks are, well, the tweets is the self loop. So this is what we call when nobody else is mentioned. But then we have the relationship mentions. If in the tweets you just mention somebody else, that's one connection that's formed. Or if you reply to a tweet, then the username is the first you reply to is the first word in your tweet, and that's how a reply is created. And obviously, retweets are the main form of communication. So usually more than half the tweets you find in the dataset are retweets. We could also add follows in here, but that's something that I would say it's a different network analysis. I would not mix interactive edges with follow edges. And also adding followers to network data set can easily well, explode or implode your Excel because there's a maximum of 1 million rows that you can have in an Excel file, and maybe 100,000 or maximum, it depends on the structure, but you can analyze 100,000 edges with NodeXL on a content level. And also the community cluster algorithm cannot go far above this. So you can really download lots of data, especially with user analysis. You can download 1 million tweets, but you cannot process all of them with one recipe. So if data sets are very large, then you need to filter out maybe older data sets, count merge duplicate edges. So there are ways how you can will filter and work with very, very large data sets. But it usually takes some time to download many tweets and followers as well. So yeah, it's a good data visualization. Yeah, it has lots of indicators that are helpful when you just only look at this network data set. So we have well, the size of a group and the location and the shape of the group and the labels. So these are already 4 things that come together when we look at the overall picture here. So currently, this is the tree map layout based on group in a box. Usually, many network analysis, they don't have, they're not using group in a box at all. They have the entire graph layout. But here it is. So this is one data set in an entire graph layout. So this is what it does give you a good overview. But in this case, you cannot add indicators from the content analysis. So if this is turned into a group in a box layout, that means the cluster that has been found with the highest number of users is placed in the left or upper left corner, and the smallest groups that are found are in the lower right corner. And this gives us a hierarchy based on the size of the network. And well, in this case, these are mostly broadcast shapes. Well, this is based on the football hashtag on the Euro 2016 Italy playing against Spain just before the kickoff. That's where sports hashtag usually look like this. They have a large group of this brand structure, especially while people are watching and writing. Yeah, they may with commenting, or they are mentioning players and what's happening on the field. But this difference, entire graph layout and group in a box layout. So that's important. And by standard, we usually use this group in a box layout because we can show the top words or top hashtags in that group, which makes it much easier to understand these clusters. And the group in a box layout, well, there's also another algorithm. This is the tree map on the left. And well, this same data set can then be shown as force directed layout also in a group. And what you don't see on the left here is it's two networks. It's a clash of hashtags right here. So it's with hashtag JKLive. Was a clash of a German TV show and an American, I think, radio show. And this then can be seen much easier in the force-directed layout. So you see that these groups are connected. That's from the German TV show, and that's the other side here. So sometimes, well, this group tree map layout, group in a box, is very helpful. But sometimes it makes sense to take a closer look at the force-directed layout. So that was Twitter. How much time do I have left here? Okay. Pointing you at YouTube networks. Yes, we have created an update last year, and during that time, also YouTube updated their API, which meant that they won't give us that much data anymore that easily. So we need API keys, large API keys to download data. And when you create your own API key, you can get easily 10,000 comments from one video. So this is the interaction on one video that was, I don't quite remember, I think it was Trump and China trade war, shown by, I'm not sure who was the author of the video, but edges here are created by commenting on the video and then replying to comments. And that's how you get these network shapes that are a little similar really to the Twitter networks that we've seen before. And here on the right, each of these nodes or vertices is a video, and the connections are drawn by the recommendation algorithm of YouTube. So you can look for any search term and then select 100. Download 100 videos and 50 recommendations for each of these videos, and that's how you would see this kind of network. And that's, I think we will do a special session on YouTube networks in a couple of weeks or months, where we are still in the process of we're gathering data and making sense out of it, and figuring out these network shapes and what they mean. And you are invited to help us with that, of course. This is YouTube. Wikipedia networks. We have actually two basic types of networks. We can even have a couple of more with the importer. So one of them is the page network that connects pages with pages. So any linked page within an article creates an edge to another article, and this is then a network on the wiki article social network analysis. And then you see these semantic clusters that are showing up. But we can also visualize user networks. So there are discussions about the articles, and there are revisions, and that is something that we can show right here. Well, users, and there are some wiki bots also in place that we can remove. So this is then the kind of the discussion network based on the Wikipedia edits, where one user comments after another user, and that's how you get a long stream of connections, and that's how it's visualized. We have Flickr networks based on what is the user network based on the subscriptions. That's, well, one way to look at it, and also the related tags network. That's then about rather semantics of these images that are shown and how they are tagged. And we get a sample image for each tag, which then looks like this. Yep, semantic networks. This is a comparison from the tutorial that I've just shown you. So I've downloaded, I think those were 1,000 tweets from @RealDonaldTrump, and this is 1,000 tweets by Speaker Pelosi. And well, this is one way or another way to look at Twitter data. You can easily learn how to do that with our tutorial. Content analysis, we've seen that. So usually bots are a question that comes up regularly in all of our tutorials. And here's one network map that I made already 2 or 3 years ago. And at first it seems like there's nothing special in here. But down here in group 2, we see there are lots of users who don't have an image, and that's kind of odd. It doesn't happen that often that it's so obvious, but I've noticed, okay, there's something wrong here. Take a closer look. I've then made a list of these users who don't have an image in there, and then downloaded tweets by them, and wanted to see, hey, how do they connect to each other? And they don't, but they all share the same contents from some bogus websites who are just were spamming and were kind of trying to get people to click on the links. And well, here you see that the hashtags used in these tweets, it's a Trump, crude oil, net gas. So the search was hashtag net gas. But here you see how these this botnet tries to reach out to different communities through different hashtags. And it looks a little different when we add other users to that network. So this shows just connections between those bots, which are not available. They don't retweet each other. But then when we look at what who these bots are retweeting or mentioning, then we see that they all have their own little audiences showing that don't overlap almost at all. Some very few overlaps are there, but in general, this is a very special kind of botnet, which has been deleted like 1 or 2 weeks after I downloaded the data. So right now you cannot look at that anymore, but it's something that popped up just by looking at the data set. Here's a different kind of bot network, which mentions NodeXL quite a lot, and the 6 types of networks from the Pew report. Well, lately not that much anymore, but there used to be lots of these networks, of these images and very similar tweets, but not exactly the same tweets. And that's how these bots operate. They change their text a little bit, so the algorithms by Twitter, they don't find this as a bot that may be then thrown out of Twitter. But in this case, what was interesting here that all of this data points to one user, and that's what's Mike Quindazi. He's an influencer on Twitter, and well, I'm pretty certain to 99% that he somehow well authored this bot network. And well, it retweets his stuff and well makes him well an influencer on these well these hashtags. So if you look at hashtag big data, machine learning, all of that, Mike Quindazi will be in the top rank usually, and that's partly because of this botnet, but also partly because he has a large audience and well it gets also retweeted a lot. So to wrap this up in the next couple of minutes, there are other ways to visualize Twitter data. So we look at multimodal networks, which means that on the one hand we have users like before, but we can also connect this to media that's shared. And that's what we see here from that previous botnet. So these images that are shared by these users, they all look the same. So this is all our NodeXL 6 types of networks images, and this is another visual indicator that something's odd here. And it's not that hard to create a network like this. It takes a little tweaking, copy and pasting the column of the media from the edges spreadsheet into the vertex 2 column, and basically that's how you get to that. This is, well, hashtag Tesla, and you see, well, there's one user here who keeps tweeting it's pretty much the same images about Tesla all the time. So, well, these are ways to find further patterns. And, well, it's hard to get Twitter, Facebook data. Well, we do get YouTube data, but we can use Twitter also to analyze cross-platform reach. If you add your to your query something like, so this was Bolsonaro, YouTube or youtube.com or youtube.be. In this case, then we can create a user YouTube video network, and then you see how these users, they cluster around this one video, while here this is a little different shape and also this different shape. And yes, so working with cross-platform data is also very interesting. This can also be done with Facebook. If we add to the query for facebook.com or fb.com or something like that. So this was during the election 2 years ago, 3 years ago in Brazil. So, and you could really see how the Facebook groups played an important role in the election campaigns of the users or of the presidential campaigns here, candidates. Okay, one more thing here is visualizing sentiment. We have a data recipe in the bundle where you can color the users and the edges based on the sentiment that has been detected. And what was interesting here is that it's usually it's a mix. It's red and green, but this especially here is very red group, means a very negative group. If we look at the hashtags, this is Tesla quality issues, Tesla parts issues, Tesla repair issues, the sociopathic business model, hashtag losers, hashtag fraud formula. So this is a group that gathered with around negativity of the search term Tesla. Okay, I'm coming to an end. So one more thing here is, so adding search terms, so query design. You can add the search term with URL colon New York Times, and then where you get only tweets that contain a URL from the Times. So that's also possible. And well, this couldn't have much more time to show you about my framework for political networks. I did with NodeXL. I will send through the link to my presentation at Sunbelt conference last year. So this is, well, network analysis of the German parliament and how the politicians and party affiliations cluster their own coalitions. And well, if you have questions about this, I can certainly answer that. But this is one last thing. This is just the tweets from the German Parliament, and this can be filtered down into several levels. So all these data sets are created from one data set. We can filter this by party, by topics, internal, external, by party interaction, look at only retweet networks, mention networks, replies. So they all come out differently and they all have their nuances, and very interesting to look at. And this is it. I think now it's time for Q&A.
Hi, Harold. Just to lead into the Q&A, thanks for that great presentation. We had a question saying, can you please show us how to sort the tweets by groups in NodeXL, if it's possible to sort groups? And if so, how would one go about that in NodeXL?
So the tweets are all found on the Edges spreadsheet. That's where you find them. And then when we look at the vertex 1, that's the one who is the author of the tweet. So vertex 1 is always the author, and vertex 2 is the one who's mentioned. So let's look at only vertex 1. Deselect everything. So here we go. And then we can sort by retweet count. So that's in there. So what are the top retweeted tweets in here? And well, we have the favorite count. So that one, sort by that one. So you see that there are just a couple of very popular tweets in here. And so yeah, this is really the hard, well, not the hard part, where you know how to do it, how to filter it, but it takes quite a while to figure out what's going on. And I'd like to point you to our Power BI Node, well, it's called NodeXL Pro Insights. We can, since last week, we have soft released our NodeXL Pro Insights Power BI template, and where we can export this to NodeXL Pro Insights, and then it will look like a Power BI is a data visualization platform by Microsoft, and it's similar to what Tableau also does. And we're figuring out what's going on in these groups. We can very easily see that on these different report pages. So here you see the groups that are clustered. Oh, it takes a little time to further download the data here. Yeah, so these are the clusters. And if you want to take a look at group 1, we just click on group 1, and everything else here will readjust. And then here you see the tweet table, top tweets in here, and who was retweeted. So so this is a much easier and simpler way to find insights from your data sets. And that's our new product, and it's well, very helpful to get to results very quickly. So for example, you also have hashtag clouds in here. So what's the hashtag cloud in group 5 look like? Well, here you go. What does it look like in group 3? Or but maybe we just want to compare two groups. Let's click here on group 1, and here we click on group 2. And then it takes a little time to load the data, and then, well, you can compare next to each other two groups. And the media files should be loaded in here in a second, and profile images, yeah, that's all live and online data. Yeah. All right. Next question, please.
So we had another question, which was, can you analyze conversations from the video network? So talking in terms of YouTube networks.
Yes, so it basically works same as the Twitter data. Well, do I have? I should have something here. So let's see if we can find YouTube. Let's see. Oops. So that we don't get as much metadata from YouTube than we get from as we get from Twitter. But over the past couple of months, I've uploaded a couple of discussion networks. So this is still in Twitter. Our search function in the gallery is not the best. Maybe we should just stick to this. YouTube. So this here, this network map. Well, it does this shows the same stuff as the YouTube as the Twitter data. All the comments have been analyzed, so the word analysis, text analysis has been run. We extract the URLs that are within the comments also, and so, well, yeah, we certainly can do that. But it's a little different how people talk on YouTube. So on Twitter, they are very much focused and want to say a lot with a few number of words. While on YouTube, well, there are much more stop words in the data, but it's definitely possible to do this content analysis there. And the data recipes that we have available are designed for that. So scroll down here to the bottom. So then we have user network standard analysis. So that will help you to analyze YouTube data. If you can just import, open the importer, YouTube user network. And well, here's where we enter a search term. Let's say just network. We get, let's say, 150 videos with 50 comments sorted by relevance. Click now OK. I will overwrite this what's already in here, but this now takes 1 minute or so, and then we have the YouTube discussion data.
And Harold, we had a couple of questions asking a similar thing. If someone's been collecting data in NodeXL in different sheets, say over a long period of time, is it possible to combine different NodeXL workbooks into one? And a sub question related to that, if someone did that, could they clean multiple tweets out of that as well?
Yes, so one feature that's missing in NodeXL is import from NodeXL, and we're working on that. So to make it easier to combine. But one way that I suggest is if you have several different data sets from Twitter, you go to the just a second. On the Edges spreadsheet, you see that there's the unique Twitter ID. Where did it go? It's called the imported ID. Here we go. So if you copy and paste this column here into a new spreadsheet, well, I can do that right now. So this copy, and we create a new spreadsheet and put it in here. And then you see, okay, some tweets, they generate many edges. So you see right here, same ID. That's where we can use the data function, remove duplicates. Now then we only have the unique IDs. And well, you can do the same thing from your other data sets. So add these IDs to this list, and then you can copy and paste that list into the Twitter tweet ID network importer. And then NodeXL will collect all of these tweets from all of these IDs again. And but note that it will only get those tweets that have not been deleted in the meantime. So there are really lots of tweets that just around for a couple of days, and accounts get suspended, obviously. Tweets get deleted, and this will return what is available currently in the database. It's also interesting to have just one data set, an old data set, and then re-import it, and then compare how much of that has been removed. You can use the VLOOKUP function with Excel. It's not that complicated. And then, well, you can take a look at what has been deleted. And well, this is not really in line with the terms of service of Twitter, because they want you to delete tweets from data sets that have been deleted in a database. But keeping up with that is, well, actually not really possible. But I think it's a valid approach to look at old data sets that were created during the time when the topic was hot, and then look, well, a year later or a month later, what's left of this, and what's gone. That's maybe even more interesting than what's still there. And so I think another way to join data sets is also when Mika has Twitter has some tutorials on that. So you can export the file to GEXIF or GDF file, and then import them all at once. But make sure to have a backup copy of your data set before exporting these, because some data gets deleted. So GEXIF will collapse, and it will it will merge the edges, multiple edges from two users, so data gets lost. But well, it's all possible, and we'll try to make it more convenient to merge these data sets in the future. Okay.
I wonder if you'd like to. I'm going to propose demoing NodeXL Pro Insights for the hashtag sustainability, which I have queued up. And what I'd like to add, or if you'd like to do it with one of yours, there was a question in the chat about being able to see the location. So could I ask you to go to the location page of the NodeXL Pro Insights report?
Oh, yes, sure.
Thank you. And this is for, I'm going to have to scroll back to see who asked about location, but yes, location is a feature. And I think it might be useful in this context to note, in the far right-hand column, we have a table called location. And it would be possible to click on any of these things. So let's click on Germany or Melbourne, that's fine. And what it does is then filter everything out, and there's Melbourne. But what it has also done is filtered the hashtags, the domains, the active users, who they mentioned, everything else got filtered. And that includes things like the client app, which is interesting because typically the most common applications are Android, iOS, and the desktop. And here, given that it's a Microsoft topic, they're actually the most common tool to post to Twitter is this tool called the Power Platform, which is interesting. And so that tells us that a lot of tweets are actually being generated by a website in this discussion. But if we were to go to, you know, other topics like or dimensions like where is Spanish spoken, and where, I think you have to control click.
Oh, just a second.
There we go. So these are the people who use a particular language in their tweets. Maybe. I don't think that we're actually, maybe control click on that.
It's not filtering correctly. I'm not sure. We have a bug in here.
Okay. If you want, there's one that's been published, and I can share that link with you. And for folks looking in the chat, you may find this. And here, Harold, I'll paste it at the bottom of the chat so that you can get to it easily. Do you see that?
Yeah, well, just a second. So I have another nice data set here from hashtag DBJ, which shows good way for the geography of the users.
Oh, perfect. Great. That would be a good example then.
So PBI reports, they look a lot better in Chrome or Edge. So Firefox is not really that good.
Mm. And so this is coming in the coming week. You should be able to, you'll see that it's showing up in our registration page, subscriptions to this. There's also NodeXL Pro Cloud Edition. But here, this is the map of everywhere. And then there's the people who speak German. And interestingly, they're mostly in Germany.
Yeah, so it's nice to take a closer look at these, at the whole network at first. So you can see that, oops, just a second. You can tell from the top words in these groups. For G3, that's top middle. That's the German group. Well, there are obviously language related clusters. So if I click on that, we see the German group, or here, well, Portuguese. So you see that, well, it's
which is to say Brazilian.
Brazilian, well, in part also from Portugal, obviously. But yes, but this is all based on the self-description, and you see here the summary. It's sometimes not perfect. You see here Birmingham, England, and Birmingham, UK. Well, it's treated as two different locations, but on the other hand, it will show up on the same spots in the map. Well, the geography, underlying geography is interesting to look at. So when it comes to spread of news, well, how quickly does news spread over the world? And with these maps, you see that it just it takes an hour or so, and then the whole world is informed about a certain hashtag. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There is a question from one of our students. Menandlar asks, what happens if all of the platforms follow the lead of Facebook and close access to the data? And I guess I'll field that if I can. The answer is that would be a very bad day. And we hope it doesn't happen. And maybe it shouldn't be allowed to happen based on legal requirements, right? What if our various nation states say, in the way that they say this to, let's say, stock markets, if a stock market wants to exist, it's going to have a certain level of reporting about what happens in the stock market. If you want to run a social media platform, you may need to allow for external audit in the same way that a publicly traded corporation allows for external audit of its accounting and of its books. And so that would be a bad thing. I will point out that some platforms are ideologically committed to making their data available. For example, Wikipedia. Wikipedia is unlikely to cut us off. Others have been reasonably generous up to a point, like Twitter, and others have recently been less generous, let's say like Facebook, who have cut us off. But others were never generous, like LinkedIn, who never gave away their data. And so in some ways, this is something that you might have to make choices about in terms of where you are willing to spend your time, your labor, and where you're willing to commit your content, which is to say, some of these places are not data banks. Some of them are data casinos. And you may prefer to store your data in a data bank rather than in a data casino. And so that might mean that we all at a certain point realize Facebook was not a good place to put my kids' photos. I need a better place. It's not a good place to talk about the birthdays and, you know, all of the life events. It turned out not to be. It's convenient, it's cheap, but that doesn't mean it's good. You could treat a casino as if it was a bank. It doesn't mean it's a good idea. And so that's one possible answer to your question. I don't think that they're going to cut us all off because I think they kind of need us, and some of them want it to be public. So things like Reddit are pretty open, Twitter's pretty open, and so on. So I hope that addressed your question. I see, thank you. Are there any other questions? Wasim, do you see that we have missed? And if not, I do want to, well, I'm mindful of the time. I think we're at our wrap up moment. I do want to give everybody a chance to ask any final questions. And I also want to underscore one of our offers. And that is, if we have not done our one-on-one with you yet, we're happy to schedule the one-on-one with you. Which is to say, with Wasim or Harold or myself, we can get on a Skype call or some kind of chat and hear from you directly what your data research project is involving. And so maybe we could offer some more direct assistance. So with that, let me hand it back to Wasim to see if we have other questions to be addressed. And if you want to take the time to ask any questions you have in the chat, that would be fine. But there you go. Let me give it back to Wasim.
Yep. So I think we've got through most of the questions. If you have missed anything, feel free to kind of send us a message, and then we can kind of address the queries for you. There was a couple of questions on whether NodeXL works on Mac, and we've shared a link to the cloud edition, and that could allow you to do that. And we are recording the session as well, so we will be sharing that within the next week. So you'll have that as well, and you can kind of
review
look through that.
And I guess we will say, don't be a stranger. We'd love to hear from you. There are a number of points of contact. Of course, you can tweet at NodeXL. You can go to our Facebook page. We have a LinkedIn group. We also are happy to hear from you at info@smrfoundation.org. I am Mark with a C-A-Smith on Skype. We're happy to hear from you there. And so I think it's pretty easy to get to us. We like hearing from our users, and we want to help you be successful with the tool, in part because we want to see your research be published. We want to see more mastery of social media network methods out in the field. And ultimately, we think that the contribution is to help clean up social media. That when a domain has a group of people who have the tools to do scrutiny, to do auditing, to do accounting, that this is how, if you will, the marketplace of ideas could become less fraudulent and overrun by low quality information. I think we all agree that social media has a low quality information problem. If you've ever seen somebody tell you, don't wear a mask, that's not a good thing to say. And so who are promoting these negative ideas? It is useful, as we've seen from Wasim's work about COVID-19 and the 5G networks. There's a lot of low quality information moving through the information networks. And we may need to have tools to, well, reduce the amount or increase the amount of good quality information or flag the low quality information. And so there you go.
Mark, one question, the Power BI versions that you've been showing, Harold and yourself, are those out for the public, or is there an expected release date for those?
Yeah, it's kind of, well, you know, this week, it could be next week. I put a link in the chat for the NodeXL Pro Insights web page. I think, is that correct? Yeah, this is it. NodeXL Pro Insights. And if you go to the bottom of that page, that's where our pricing is going to be. It's very similar to our standard, which is to always have 3 tiers of price: the commercial, the academic / nonprofit, and then the student. So it will be possible within the next week to dial into NodeXL and get your data, analyze your data, visualize your data, and then publish it to NodeXL Pro Insights and get a report very much like the one that you've seen Harold show you here today. Okay.
And I think there's another question in there regarding filtering. So when I filter the data, what does it look like? Yes, so it's like these edges are skipped. We have on each spreadsheet, on the edges spreadsheet, on the vertices spreadsheet, and on the group spreadsheet, there is the column called visibility. And there you can choose also to skip, show, or hide. And if you skip any group or edge or user and then refresh the graph, that will be gone. It depends on how you set it up. And if you just use a regular filter, like I just did for one group, so that works similar to say. But the filtering, I recommend to not use the regular Excel filtering and rather use the column visibility to adjust your network map. And so, if, for example, if you go to the group spreadsheet and say, and skip all groups, and you just fill in column show for G1, then G1 will be laid out as a whole and then all over the graph pane. So, do we have another question here?
Okay. All right. We will note that these events will be continuing month to month and that there will soon be an intermediate level version of this event that will run about 4 times a year. The intro will run almost every month. And that if you'd like to, you are welcome to consider returning. Or if you think it was a good use of your time, we would be very appreciative if you shared that opinion with your colleagues, because we'd love to see them here next month too. Any other final comments? And I guess if any of our participants would like to unmute and have a final word, they're also welcome to do so.
Yeah, if there's no kind of further comments or questions, we could kind of wrap up the session here.
Right. All right. Well, I would love to express my appreciation for all of our students. Thank you for spending your time here today with us. I'd also like to say thank you to Wasim and Harold for their contributions and presentation today. I guess I would end our discussions together by pointing you to a page on the SMR Foundation website. And this is both a farewell and an invitation. If you visit us at smrfoundation.org/research/our network, you'll see that, well, some of the faces that you see on screen right now are here again, and some others. And many of these people are scholars, researchers, professionals interested in understanding social media. And the invitation part goes like this: wouldn't your photo look good on that page? And how do you do that? Well, we have a conversation. Well, we'd be happy to have that conversation with you. But there's room at the bottom of the page. We should shuffle them, maybe do them alphabetically. All right. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and so on. Thank you for the interest in NodeXL. We are here to help you succeed with the tool, and we love to hear from our users. So don't be a stranger. Thank you, Wasim, for all your efforts in organizing this. And we look forward to doing it again once a month, and then the advanced class, I think, every quarter. So with that, goodbye from California.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. See you, everyone. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye from Israel.
Bye-bye from Colombia.
Oh, that's great. That's
Bye,
great.
Vivian.
Bye, nos hablamos mañana, si Dios
Hablamos
quiere.
mañana. Ok, bye-bye.
Agendado, un abrazo grande.
Muchas gracias. Lo mismo para ti. Chao.
Gracias.